Hi everyone, and welcome to Meaning Quest, a channel dedicated to the pursuit of meaning in the human life through the understanding of spiritual principles. This is the Attention Series, Part 2. So today we will discuss two important aspects of our attention that we will see that define our way in which we perceive the world, and actually that are influenced, or they define the way the world also reflects upon ourselves or reflects into us. And they are very important because they will, the understanding of these two forms or characteristics of attention will help us to discern and to choose which aspects, which information do we allow to influence us on a daily basis. What we let in and what we filter out. So let's dig in. Fundamentally, we can discuss the division of attention or of attention processes into two broad categories: conscious or voluntary attention and unconscious, involuntary attention. First, we can deduce that voluntary or conscious processes of attention are in a certain way creative, while involuntary unconscious forms of attention can be considered maintaining or supporting, in which involuntary attention is triggered by external stimuli in order to maintain vital processes. One of the few psychologists who studied attention processes more closely was Theodule Ribot. He was French. Anyway, he states that, and I quote, "Spontaneous attention is the only form of attention that appears before the experience of education or other artificial methods." End quote. He goes even further, considering this form of attention as tributary to external stimuli. For example, pleasure, pain, the antagonism between pleasure and pain. In other words, Ribot states that the man in this state, or a person in this state, will direct his attention only to what interests him or what concerns him, more precisely to what produces a sensation, whether pleasant or unpleasant. He thus considers that this type of attention has its roots in the deepest aspects of our being. And here Ribot makes, we could say, a revolutionary statement, if this statement were to be completely or profoundly understood or interpreted in a correct way, namely that the aspects that attract our spontaneous attention define the deep and real character of our being. I will repeat this because it's important. So, Ribot states that whatever attracts spontaneously our attention defines us as a human, or defines our character, defines our inner world, let's say. In other words, if our attention is spontaneously drawn, let's say, to gossip, this is a sign that our inner nature, in other words, our character, is defined by this inferior tendency. If our spontaneous attention is drawn to higher, more refined aspects, to divinely inspired art, higher mathematics, philosophy, you pick, then indeed we can also say that our deeper nature is more refined, more elevated. This is an aspect that is worth meditating on and remembering. Where our spontaneous attention is drawn, what we prefer involuntarily is defining for our level of inner maturity that we reached so far. I say it again. Where our spontaneous attention goes, or where our spontaneous attention is drawn, what we involuntarily prefer or what we spontaneously prefer or are attracted to is defining for our real level of consciousness or inner maturity that we achieved. Let this sink in for a while. This finding can, however, immediately lead us to examine the relationship that exists between predominant spontaneous attention and character, or level of personality development, because the inverse relationship that is established between these two aspects is also outlined, namely, if the way in which spontaneous attention is directed defines our character, then can character also be defined by the quality of information that the subject receives during its daily activities, or that is subject to in daily activities, during daily activities. Let this also sink in for a while, because this also shows that what we consume as entertainment, whatever we read, even going more to our daily interactions and daily conversation topics that we can control, of course, are influencing our character. And we will dwell on this for a while, and we will analyze this further also in other videos. Reiterating the negative influence of modern technology on the human being, I will make here an amendment. The technology is not evil or negative in its own nature. It is negative in the way we use it, of course, like most of our inventions as a species. We can say thus that the access to information or to a poor quality information or a poor quality content is facilitated, sadly, nowadays by the media, and even more so, it is facilitated by the packaging of information in forms that are very attractive to our attention, which is thus easily engaged in viewing or reading, meaning assimilating it in their inner being, consuming it, etc. We are well aware now that everything that we consume in entertainment, in news, it's carefully studied to be tailored to our attention, to increase our hormone levels even, or our even to the colors that we prefer, or the colors that make us, let's say, be more prone to remain and to be engaged in a program or in a movie or whatever. So everything is carefully selected, and everything now it's carefully tailored to grabbing our attention, and thus to keep us engaged in some programs that probably we shouldn't be engaged in if we were more careful. So, for example, a movie will have probably sometimes, and you can find yourselves plenty of examples. So a movie can have subversive message or even a deep rooted malevolent message, beautifully packed in shiny, beloved actors that are starring in beautiful landscapes, in a very engaging action, but still the, let's say, subliminal or the underlining message, it's not always a good one, or maybe it's not very good for us in terms of directing our attention and our consciousness towards good, towards the betterment of our being. So, to put it mildly. It is very interesting that to date no experiment has been conducted to determine the change in the characters of the viewers, if only elevated, refined, uplifting, and common sense aspects were presented in the TV program schedule. No, it's not. We don't, to my knowledge, so far, there is no experiment conducted to show the influence of, let's say, benefic messages and of the good that is sent towards the viewers through programs that are tailored to inspire and to uplift. No, there has been no such study, and sadly there are fewer and fewer programs that we can call uplifting or let's say inspiring in a moral or in a virtuous way. This is how the situation is now, in the present, when everything that is presented, an overwhelming majority of the programs, is focused on violence, vulgarity, gregarious spirit, and even abhorrent content. This is argued with the false statement that it is what the public demands. No, it is not what the public is asking. These programs have been serving it for decades now, and moreover, we can see a continuous degradation of the quality of their content the closer we get to present. So it is obviously a conscious and intentional action. It is worth also thinking about the fact that although recently there have been more and more voices raised against the deeply harmful content of TV programs, of aggressive video games that lead to the proliferation of violence and drug use, no measures are taken. And what is more, the connection between the content of TV programs, some computer games, etc., and the degradation of society in general is vehemently denied. This is why it is very important and even necessary to understand the mechanism of attention processes, especially now, perhaps more than at any time in history, when we are bombarded daily with information that we digest wholesale, with violent images and scenes, and when every minute of our attention is claimed for issues decided by other people, for obscure political or corporate interests, all of which have profit and manipulation as their main or some of their objectives. This is why it is very important and urgently necessary to understand the mechanism of attention processes, especially now, perhaps more than at any time in the known history, when we are bombarded daily with information that we digest in a wholesale manner, with violent images and scenes, and when every minute of our attention is claimed for issues decided by other people, for political and corporate interests that are strange to us, that are unknown to us, all of which that have profit and manipulation as part of their objectives. If we now properly understand the importance of the processes of our attention, the fact that it is preferable to have a certain amount of control over it, the fact that it is important to be aware of its impact so that we can filter what we introduce into our being through our attention process. It's like a sort of feeding mechanism of the sorts, right? We are eating with our mind, let's say. And so if we are attentive and if we are aware of what we consume, the food that we consume for our body, then we should perhaps pay the same kind of care or attention to what we consume as the food of our mind, of our consciousness. So as well as we become aware of this, we will be able gradually to exert a real transformation for the better quality of our life, for the betterment of the quality of our lives. We will discuss in the next videos some of the methods through which we can control our attention and be, let's say, more in charge of what we consume through our mind and through our consciousness. We will meet in the next video. Remember that a meaningful life will shine a light on everybody and on everything that surrounds it. But first of all, this light will be in our heart. May you all have a life full of meaning.